Good evening, family. You've tuned in again to another version of the Journey 2020. And we welcome you to this hour of discussion, of hopefully education, entertainment, and hopefully a little bit of humor. And tonight, as usual, I'm Dr. John Robertson, clinical psychologist, and my intrepid co-host, Mr. Charles Morris. Charles?
Oh, well, thank you, Dr. Robinson. I am happy to see you.
Yeah, that's right. I was there last week. Yeah.
I know how busy you've been.
It has been a road race.
Yeah.
That's it.
You know what? That's a blessing, though.
Well, I'm just glad to be on the road and able to race.
Right, yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Charles Morris. Welcome to the Journey 2020. Happy that you're tuning in. Also, have a shout out to give. You know, I called you up a few weeks ago, about a week or so ago, and we had this person on the phone. Mm-hmm. So she said she'd be tuning in. So I just said, hello, Bam Bam. That's what her mama named her. Bam Bam. From when I say Alabama, you say Bama. Alabama. So she said she'd be tuning in. And so we wanted to give her a shout out. And she's also in the field. The same as you, so we have interesting conversations from time to time. Okay. But she's actually up in Jacksonville, so hello, Bam Bam.
Well, if you're in the same field, hello, Dr. Bam Bam.
That's funny.
And now you put that one on Charles.
That's funny. I like that one.
Okay.
But anyway, I asked our guest to come on tonight simply because, as you know, Ferguson is back in the news. In addition to some other shootings that has been taking place, around the country. And we went fishing the other day, James and I. And Mr. Crawford, it's funny because there's just something about when a person say they in law enforcement, there's just something about when you always go, okay, because now you're trying to feel them out, like, okay, like what does, like, okay, you, well, it's kind of like, are you a good cop, bad cop? Are you kind of like in between?
Well, listen, I'll put it this way, say, are you against us or are you for us? Well, that is my thought.
But I have a rule. Okay, and I will always have this rule. Okay, if I'm dating somebody, right? I mean, if I just met somebody and I'm on a dating scene, and I found out their ex was a cop, I'm done. I am not talking to you. I'm not dating you. There's no way. If you just broke up with a cop, I'm not dealing with you.
Okay. Tell me why. Tell me why.
Because they're crazy. Because there's too many stories that you hear of the jealous cop, and you don't know the relationship, you don't know that person. It's not worth, because you don't know where they are. Is what I'm saying.
Right.
You don't know where they are, what kind of breakup there was. All I need to know is he's a cop. I don't need to know nothing else. I don't need to know nothing else. I'm not talking to you.
Okay. No, I got you. Because you may be, what did they call it? Collateral damage? Okay. I got you now.
I'm serious. Yeah. So I don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Once I hear, well, my ex-husband, I just, especially if it's a husband. We just went through a divorce. Oh no, delete. I am deleting you out of my phone. I'm not talking to you. I'm not going to take that chance. Because that ego and because you there. In most relationships, whether it's the marriage, it's still, well, you still my woman. And whatever that is, that kind of thing, because when you hear a person say, I'm law enforcement, you automatically look at them like, okay, like, what psychological,
state are you currently in?
And I was just telling James about an ex-girlfriend that I had that worked for law enforcement in the office. And I dated her for about 3 or 4 years. And out of those 3 or 4 years, because she had been working there, she had been working with them probably about 6 years before I met her. So now you add on another 3 or 4 years. And I'm telling you, whenever she worked overtime and worked on the weekends, she was sweating bullets. To her, this is her speaking. This is her exact words. She said, I hate being in the building on the weekends around them, because she said a lot of them, this is her speaking now, please, okay.
Right.
A lot of them abuse alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them abuse their wives. This is her observation.
Mm-hmm.
And she just was nervous about them just coming in and just shooting up the place. And she was always, this is her,
Her story, right.
this was her story saying, I'm just nervous when I'm in the building with them like that because I don't know she's like, I don't know what's going to happen today.
Right.
And this is her, just an ordinary person who works in the office, and the things that she see and she says, this is what I feel just in the office.
Right.
So I don't know what to say about that. I mean, maybe James can talk about it. I don't know.
Well, since we have James here,
okay,
and who
we need to introduce James Crawford,
who is as they say, the first person. It can give first-person testimony to that. Why don't we let James, go ahead and...
Well, actually, James, introduce yourself and just tell us why you're here as far as law enforcement.
Why I'm here? James Crawford. I was in the Detroit Police Department. Retired in 1987. Got away from the cold and snow and moved to Florida in 88.
Okay.
But during the time I was there, a lot of the stuff that's still going on now was going on then.
Okay.
And like I mentioned last time I was on the air, there's a book I'm working on called Same Music, Different Band. It just simply says that what happened way back then, it has not changed.
Okay.
And I was one of the guys that tried to stop a lot of things, and that's the kind they don't want around.
Right.
And finally I took as much as I could, and after enough threats and whatever, and being told I would never ever be promoted again, I figured I had 7 more years to go. I took her early out and left.
Let me ask you this right here. If you had a chance to do it all over again, would you still quit when you quit, or would you stay a little longer if you had to do it all over again?
Having done what I did after I left, I would have left what I did.
Okay.
If I had stayed there, I would still be there in all that cold and ice and fighting with these folks. But after I left, I got a chance I was single, and I got a chance to do everything. It's not like I'm reading my obituary, but I got to go to all the states. I've been to countries, all over Europe.
Actually, the reason why I asked that question was because when we talk, you felt that you could be a difference maker.
I did.
No. I'm saying you, and I'm saying because of that, if you had a chance to do that's why I asked the question.
Okay. I'm of the opinion that it's not going to make a big difference.
Okay.
Difference makers aren't the kind of
There's not enough of you.
No.
Yeah, there's not enough of you.
And there's just too many people around you and above you that can control your fate that are not that way, and it's just not going to happen.
Right.
And a cousin of mine wrote an article recently for the Huffington Post, was very optimistic about how things are going to change, and I just told him, I said, I know you're my cousin, love you dearly, but you may want to consider writing for Walt Disney. That's pure fantasy what you're talking about.
Right.
It's not going to happen. At least not in my lifetime, I don't think.
What was he talking about specifically the Ferguson Police?
Well, he was talking about racism in general and how certain white officers and white people have a sense of entitlement, and that all this is beginning to come down on them. And when it keeps coming down on them, they're going to realize that they don't, and they're going to change. And I don't ever see that happening. I don't ever see that happening. At least not in my lifetime.
Yeah. One of the interesting things, James, that you just said is that there's so many people around that the change makers and above them that it's very very difficult. One of the things that I saw as we were talking about Ferguson and the report that came out this week from the Department of Justice, led by Eric Holder, was that for apparently the first time, an administrator at the top, Holder, basically not only endorsed but laid out the report in some very plain terms. Do you think that a report like that has the potential, of creating some change, or will it be just another document that'll just, a little hubbub and then die down?
It may be if they put the right people in. I'm in the process of reading it now. I finally got a copy. I've been reading excerpts off the internet, some of the things that happened. I actually got the whole 105-page report this morning.
Right.
And so I started reading it earlier today. And it's going to set a pattern. It may change things, but it may be the same for a while. It gets old, it gets out of the newspaper, and then it goes back to where it was. I'm usually pretty optimistic, but when this comes to stuff like this, I'm not the least bit optimistic. I think there are a number of Fergusons. Now, if they did it at maybe a dozen more places, it might begin to pick up. But I just think they're going to make some changes, and then unless they stay right on top of it, it's going to be right back like it was, unless they do a lot of changes. Now, one of the things, a question I've been asked several times is, do you think they should disband the police department? And my answer to that is yes, but there's a way you do it. You don't just say, all of you are fired. Although I think the Department of Justice has the right to do that, there has to be a process that you do it, because otherwise you can end up creating more problems than you have now. And all 54 officers on the department weren't like that. There are some good guys probably on the department. There's some that probably never even went on the street that had nothing to do with what went on. And there's some that really hated it but just didn't dare say anything. There are those in every department. So I think what they need to do is to have a blue ribbon group, probably no more than 7 or 8, because you get too many, that creates problems. And you need diversity. You need white citizens, you need black citizens, you need educators, you need a legal advisor, and just sit down and say, okay, we assemble this police department, what are we going to do? And I think they should review all 54 of the officers' files, determine which ones they want to keep, get rid of all of them, and then have them come back, and you know which ones you're going to hire first. You can hire them back the next day if you want to. But everybody would have to, I think, reapply. And some of them can go back the very next day if they set it up that way. And others may not come back at all.
Now, and again, I'm glad that you laid it out that way, because I haven't heard as yet any plan of, as they say, what happens the next day. After this report is over, and your view of the Blue Ribbon Panel is one of the most concrete ideas that I've heard. One of the questions that has come up is that who then polices an area, and when we're talking about Ferguson, the way that I'm thinking about it is that it's an example of so many other police forces, etc., including your Detroit police force, which is again much larger city, but from what we talked about the last time when you were here, just about the same kind of issues.
In 1974, which is 40 years ago, over 40 years ago, Detroit, the police department, I was a member then, had a specialized unit called STRESS. It was an acronym for Stop Robberies, Enjoy Safe Streets. And they were with the lead group, probably 20, 30 officers. And they were shooting people like crazy. Over 20 people were killed by STRESS officers. Almost all of them were black. For little or nothing. And one guy was involved in 12 shootings, and 5 of them where he fired the fatal shot. And that shouldn't have happened. So it started way back, and they would shoot guys. Back then, I was there then. It's like almost for nothing. And the thing that's been on the department and departments for years and years is that old thing, we thought he was reaching for a weapon. That is the oldest answer that in the book, and everybody uses it. And how it's hard to dispute it unless you have a video right there. He looked like he was reaching for a weapon. And I feared for my safety, so I shot him. And one other thing that I don't want to monopolize all the time is that they want to justify everything. Every shooting, the union stick up for the guys, and the department does not want to be sued, the city, and so they try to justify everything that the officer does, unless it's just so blatant that you can't.
Yeah, right.
Now, two instances in particular that I was personally involved in, we had a rule that an officer cannot fire his weapon. He had 5 reasons. Arson, robbery, and self-protection, and so on. But the 2 key factors were, if you fire your weapon under one of those 5 reasons, you have to, 1, know that a crime was committed, and number 2, you must know with virtual certainty, those were the 2 key words, virtual certainty, that this person committed that crime. And if you didn't know that, you could not fire your weapon.
Okay.
So with an incident where officers got to run on a house fire, the entire 2nd floor was engulfed in flames. Some guy jumped off the top porch. They told him to stop. He kept running. They shot him. Now they worked for me, and my boss insisted that I justify the shooting. I said, "Commander, I can't do that."
Right.
It doesn't fit any of the 5 categories. They had no idea why. He may have lived there. He may have been running because he was old tickets. They had no idea it was an arson. All they saw was a man jump off the 2nd floor and run, and the house was on fire. They had no right to shoot him. And they gave me a hard time, and I refused to do it. And matter of fact, we got kind of into it. I said, "Well, you ordered me to write a false report." When I said that, he said, "No, get out of my office." And he gave it to someone else, and that other lieutenant justified that shooting.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's been going on. This was back in 77, 78, so it's been going on for a long time.
Now, in terms of your experience, James, what have you found to be the best way of if you want to call it, monitoring to see like something like that doesn't happen? Because it sounds like that would be part of a whole system where if you try to, as you said, buck the system, you're the outcast. What's a way that, from your experience, that you would see as a way of fighting that kind of thing?
The only way you can start doing it is start prosecuting the guys and finding them at fault for what they did. And until that happens, like this guy that choked the guy in New York. Now, although they say it wasn't against the law, the chokehold, it was against department rules and regulations. The chief came right out and said that. But yet there's nothing that says he's been disciplined for choking that man, for violating that. That's just kind of slowly slipped away under the rug. But if that's the case, he should have been disciplined, maybe suspended for several days or whatever.
But
that's not going to happen.
But if they do that, now when they get ready to sue the city, then the family said, "Look, So now I'm going to say something that's just my opinion, and we talked about it while we was fishing. Stan Murray, you know Stan Murray?
Oh, at the sheriff's department?
Yeah. Okay. Stan Murray and I are frat brothers, and we do a lot of things together. And as you know, you took part of the summit, and it was called "Are We Raising Our Kids to Be in Harm's Way?" Well, shortly after that, Stan called and said he wanted to do a follow-up because they started shooting at cops. Okay, so I said, great. In addition to Verona Jackson, she also did another one as well, which was great. It was very informative, for the kids. But in my opinion, which I was saying to you the other day while we was fishing, that to me, it's not a surprise that the shootings are taking place. Stan seemed to be surprised that the shootings were taking place. But the conversation that I was having with you was that as a whole, there seems to be such a disconnect. And in this country, and maybe you can say something to this, but the mentality is us against them. And that's a weird feeling, because that's that whole thing of when you meet a person who says I'm a cop, that's that feeling. It's like, are you one of these cops that is us against them, or do you get it? That's the first thing that pop in your mind, because somehow or another human nature takes over when it comes to the ego, and you talk about these privileges and these rights that they feel that they have. So when I live in this country and I look to the leadership of this country and I see what I see, and the leaders are so blind by their wrongdoing, and they think that they have the right to just break their own laws. Absolutely. And to justify all the things that I see, because I don't have to watch CNN, I don't have to watch Fox News, and I don't have to watch it over and over again. I see something for about 10 seconds, I see it. You don't have to go to the jury. I see what's going on. I don't need to go talk to nobody. I see it. I know right and I know wrong. Okay? There's a lot of other things that take place, but I see right and wrong. So as a person who looks for the leadership, who is supposed to be the government that bodies us to protect us and supposed to be our leaders, if you're so crooked, then I naturally gonna want to protect myself, and I'm gonna look at you in a certain way so I can justify my madness because you justifying yours. And so now when they talk about ISIS and they's recruiting these people to go to ISIS, that's another way of when ISIS go talk to these people, they go, look at your government. Look at how they treat you. Now, I'm not saying that they're right, but when you go talk to these young people and you see the government and you got a chance to fix something and you want to consistently cover it up, and then when there's, as they say, what is it, the roosters, what is it?
Chickens come home to roost.
Right, and then you're dealing with your madness simply because you don't want, it's more about being sued than getting rid of the bad people, because we all know that there's bad cops. It's not that complicated. But you consistently see, it's just like when the NFL players came out with the shirts and the Ferguson police came and said all the things that they said. That just goes to show you how disconnected they are. Because that was wrong for them to do that. Instead of them using it to spin it in a way to say we're trying to fix our problems, all they're doing is saying it's us against you.
That's the way a lot of folks think about it. And I mean, it's just hard to get them to change that way, because there's so many people involved. It's so much easier to let this stuff go than to fight it, as far as the establishment is concerned. And my wife and I were talking about this the other day. Their boundaries have just been obliterated. I mean, there's no such thing as a guy goes and rob somebody. Oh well, it happens all the time. And they just don't care.
Well, let me ask you this right here. When during the summit, I was asked this question, and I think I was looked at like I was crazy. I'm serious. I think I was looked at like I was crazy. When I was talking about the training to become a police officer, and I asked the question, because I look at it like this: everybody can't be a Navy SEAL. The standards are high. Okay, everybody can't go and train to be a Navy SEAL. The standards are set. And so my question is, why are the standards so low to be a police officer, in the sense of the fact that you are on a battlefield? Now, to me, there should be certain sections of the police department in which people can be hired to do certain things. But when you're allowed to carry a gun, you have the discretion to be able to pull it out and shoot and do whatever it is. Absolutely. The standards should be higher. And I don't get it. Well, actually, I was given the answer, because they don't care about us. That's what I was told, in the sense to say that how they view us, again, because they don't have to justify the wrong, because it's more about them and how they see themselves and how they see us as a culture.
Well, over the years, I would tell you, that used to be true. The standards were higher. They have actually been lowered, because years ago, if you had a moving violation, that's it. You couldn't join the police department for so long. And now they take guys who've had stuff expunged from their records. I mean, you get guys that are on the job that are probation for, I mean, it's unbelievable. And they just simply let things go. There's just no parameters. And there's one last thing. Okay. We had in Detroit a situation where we had a number of female officers. They were on welfare, getting food stamps, and stealing from the police department. When they got caught, they had to, all they had to do was to pay back the money. They didn't get fired, nothing happened to them. It never should have happened.
Right.
And they started carrying a gun every day, and they had this fraud thing on their record, and that was it.
Now, James, why do you think that those standards were lowered?
Well, according to Detroit, because they needed more officers, they couldn't find any, and they were having trouble finding the number of officers. They got money, I think, to hire more officers, and they didn't have the applicants. 1 year, I did recruiting in college to try to get more college students to come. And we went to some of these campuses. We had these little things with guys who, and half the time, 1 or 2 people would come in. That was it.
Okay.
And so they just say, okay, we need somebody, and they just started gathering people. I mean, it's just that simple.
My goodness. Well, as another side of that, one of the things that I was wondering is that what about the guys who have come out of, let's say the military, or have some background where that they've performed in tense or stressful situations. Had that been considered?
Well, that's part of it, but you also have to have people. That's a military type of force type of thing. You need people that can communicate with people. You can sit down and talk to them.
Okay.
And don't be so quick to shoot and beat and so on.
Okay.
All these shootings they had, the last shooting they had was just past Monday, just the one in Wisconsin, where a guy was naked and running around in front of the building, and someone called the police. He ran inside. He was completely nude. No weapons, no nothing. The officer had a taser, and he also had pepper spray. And when this guy charged him, who was totally nude, he shot him and killed him. I mean,
well,
the most the guy could do was try to overpower him, but you had a taser, you had pepper spray, and the third choice was a weapon. He pulled a weapon, he shot the guy dead.
Now, with that kind of situation, the first thing that would come to my mind is that the guy had a mental health problem.
He did. Okay. No question about it.
And so instead of going in and like you said, shooting this guy, would it have been? Let's put it this way: in a situation when you were on the force, how do you think that you or officers like you might have handled that situation?
Well, we weren't trained to deal with mentally ill people. We had a psychiatrist on call, and we had a guy that we thought was mentally incapacitated, was creating a lot of problems. Before we would use any type of fatal force, we would call him, and the psychiatrist would actually come out and talk to the guy. And we had that in Detroit. That's one good thing they did have.
Right.
Well, I guess at that point, at that time, let's just say that there's some force taking place, but you were saying that it was obvious that the guy didn't have a weapon. And again, knowing Mr. Washington and hearing his stories and knowing his training, to him it's not rocket science, but to me it goes back to the training. Again, it goes back to the training. If I don't get how you can be a police officer and your only option is to pull a gun, I just don't get that. I just don't
get that. One thing too, let me just say this here. And this thing, when we heard this in the academy, or after we got out of the academy, most of us rookies didn't believe it. But the more we were out on the street, the more we saw. In the academy, they teach you all these good things. Don't do this, don't do this. The color is blue, not black, not white, so and so. When you get out on the street, some of the senior officers, especially with the black officers, said, look, forget about all that BS you hear in the academy, because it's not like that out here. The guys out here been out here for a long time. They're going to do it their way, and have these officers young and tell them, no, don't, you don't need to do all that. Well, in the academy, forget the academy. This is how you're going to do it. And they told them the wrong way to do it. And from that, and they picked it up and they just continued doing it. Once you get out here with these officers that have been doing the same stuff for years and years, as a rookie, you pick up those habits and then you pass them on to the next one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So again, it gets back to not only just the initial training, but the kind of retraining that the veteran officers give to these rookies, out on the street, which throws out any of those kind of things that they may have learned in the academy.
And there's so much protection. You hear all this about the blue code of silence and all that, like it's some myth. It's not. They protect the hell out of each other. I'm telling you, with anything. I had officers who would come in off duty, on the shift, come in drunk as a skunk. They've been on the shift for 8 hours. Matter of fact, I got a call. Lady said, Lieutenant, one of the officers just came to my house, and he was on the other side of the screen door, and I almost got a high talking to him. The alcohol was reeking. Well, I would suspend them, and they would go and have to go through the process. Well, a lot of lieutenants would send them home sick. I said, well, the shift's over now, let's let them go on home. And that would be the end of it.
Well, see, and that's what I was talking about. My friend who would see this kind of stuff, and she would talk about how much they would drink, how much anger they would have. She would talk about the domestic violence and the stuff that she would see, the stuff that she would know, and she said it just made her very nervous to be in the building with them because she didn't know when they was gonna snap. And that's what I was talking about.
See, when I grew up,
she'd share that all the time.
I had this cop in my school, and I just saw him, and I just saw this image. I had this fantastic image of police officers, how good they were. And this is in the late 40s, early 50s, and I couldn't wait. I quit teaching high school to be a cop because I just knew I was going to get in there and just make a big difference, and I'm going to do this and do that, and I'm going to be Mr. Honest. And I was about as out of place as
You know what? I had someone, actually a couple of police officers tell me this right here. They said, you watch these movies and these shoot 'em up, bang bang movies and stories and everything, and they tell me, they said, well, my cop experience is more like Barney Miller. They say it's more like Barney Miller than anything. I was like, okay, all right.
Well, it's not. It's nowhere. I was so disappointed after the first 2 years. I said, I can't believe this. I can't believe this.
How did you feel when you found out that they loosened your nuts on your tire?
It scared me. I started checking my car every day and looking under the hood and stuff. And when he cut my brake line, lucky the traffic had just started, or I got hit by 3 or 4 cars.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Somebody allegedly cut it to loosen the nugs on his
they didn't loosen, they took them off.
They took them off.
I had 3 missing.
Wow.
Yeah, and they cut his brake line.
Wow. James, I know we talked a little bit about that when you were on the program the last time. What was it that triggered them doing this retribution against you?
Well, I got as a rookie, and even my first year,
older rookie.
I was 28 when I joined the police. I had a reputation of being a nice, honest guy. So they had this task force that was investigating corrupt police officers, and the police commissioner handpicked me. And I was just thrilled to death. I'm this rookie. The commissioner handpicked me. Had I known, I never would have done it. Because once you get out there and you start investigating these guys and you're doing a little bit of everything, they hate you for it. It's okay to catch John Smith for selling dope and bust him, but don't bust another cop for selling dope. Just let him resign and go home. If you do, then you better watch your back. That's just the way it is. And it's a situation, it seems oversimplified, but it's either you're with us or against us. That is the mentality of police officers, period.
Right.
Either you're with us or you're against us. There's no gray area whatsoever. And if you don't help cover up stuff, you don't help cover up lies and stuff, then you're somebody that they don't want to be around.
What you think the future holds is for what's going on right now when it comes to all of this that's going on, because a lot of things are being exposed. What you think the future holds for law enforcement changes that we may see?
Well, law says stay on it. They need some training, definitely more training. They need more interaction with the community. And you need some people at the top that really are concerned. And right now, I think this captain with the state police in Missouri, he was born in Ferguson.
Oh, yeah.
I think he would make a great chief of police. I mean, guys like that, they can just sit down and just hold people accountable. You have to start being held accountable for what you do. And you can't keep letting these things build up and letting the guy, like, I was reading the 105-page report from Eric Holder, and one of the things the chief allegedly said is that some of you guys have got a lot of infractions, you're not doing this right, you're not doing that, but if you bring me in a few more arrests, a few more tickets, I'll overlook it. That was in the report.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
And it's been in the news, I think, the last few weeks that they're trying to do away with the quotas when it comes to because nobody wanted to believe that that was actually the case, that you had a certain quota of tickets and those type of things that you had to write and all that other.
Well, they had and here's the truth about Ferguson. They were so brazen and like, I don't give a damn, that they knew that the DOJ was coming in to do a report, an investigation. They didn't even make the attempt to hide these emails. I mean, they got emails. I read one in that page report where they talked about the President Obama, compared him to a chimpanzee. They had a thing where 3 African women were dancing, with a no top, and they caption read, Michelle Obama's high school reunion. I mean, stuff like that. These were being passed back and forth amongst the officers. We had an officer that had a guy was sitting in his car cooling off, playing basketball, and because the motor was on, technically he's in operating the car. Okay, that's the rule. At least it was in Michigan. If you're sitting in a car behind the wheel and the motor's on, although the car is not moving, technically you're in control of that car. You're operating that motor vehicle. The guy didn't have a license; it expired. So he wrote him a ticket for not having an expired license, and then also for not having it on him. The officer asked the guy what his name. He said, "My name is Mike." Well, the man's name was Michael. So he gave him a ticket for giving false information to a police officer. He left there with 8 tickets. This is in that report. 8 tickets because they asked him, can we search your car? He says, no, you cannot search my car. And because he would not let them search his car, he left there with 8 citations. Well, if you go to court, unless the judge throws some of those out, you have to pay a fine for each and every one of those. And those fines were heavy. If you don't pay them on time or you don't show up, which is kind of a stupid thing to do because you don't have the money, people just don't show up, which is their fault. But if you go there and you don't have the money, then they're like, not interest, I don't know what they call it in the police department, but you end up paying more money. And they had one lady, they had 2 parking tickets, $150 in 2007. This is now 2015. She didn't pay them in full because she lost her job and she said she was homeless, what it says in the report. And she ended up in jail twice, locked up twice for not paying these tickets. Spent 6 days in jail. So far, she has paid $550 for this $151 ticket. And now, 8 years later, she still owes $452. And this is the type of thing they were doing to citizen after citizen after citizen.
But see, that's what I mean by, and people going to take this the wrong way. When these people try to go recruit you to go against your country, because it's those type of things that it's just taking advantage. And
but you got to use a little common sense.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, I'm saying some of these people that go with ISIS, that's just a weak mind.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that you can get into that mindset.
Yeah.
Okay.
Possibly. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, just forget ISIS. I'm talking about the rebellion that you may have against this country simply because of how you see them and how they treat you, and they are supposed to be for you.
Yeah. There's a lot of angry black folks out here. People don't understand why.
Well, just you don't have to be black. You can just live in this country and you see the little simple things, and you put people in predicaments because I mean I was watching a video of Hakeem's conference, and one of his speakers was highlighting his stepson who has spent time in prison. So CNN was doing this special on these two gentlemen. They was following them getting out of prison. Okay, so what they did was they came to them about a month before they were getting out of prison. Okay, so they were talking to them, following them. And to make a long story short, the two gentlemen that were getting out of prison, the day that one of them got out of prison, that's when he found out that he had another charge. Now, this guy's been in prison for like 6 years.
Oh, heaven.
Now, the day that he gets out is the day that they decide to charge him.
Okay. So now he's back in.
Okay. Okay, now he's his girlfriend trying to hang in there with him because he got, a couple of kids and little babies.
Right.
I think he had been there he had been in there a couple of times, but this time I think he was in there for like two years. So he had never seen his other child.
Wow.
So now he's getting out of prison, trying to find his way. And the day that he gets out, they charge him. He's thinking he's going home to try to find something to do with his life. Now he got this other obstacle to overcome when he had just spent however many months of time that he had spent in prison. The other gentleman the gentleman was there speaking, that was his stepson. He was in prison, but he had a little bit more support group. Okay, so when it's all said and done, he didn't have time to show part 2 because he said CNN did a part 2. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching this gentleman, and I know the story. I know he was going back to prison. And so I asked him, I said, so what happened to the two gentlemen? He said, well, my stepson is doing fine because when he has a passion for fitness. So he's a personal trainer. And he said, oh, the women love him.
Okay.
So he has a lot of clientele because he said because he's very passionate and he's good at what he does. He's very good at it. He studies it and he knows his stuff.
Right.
But he had the support and the backing from him and some family members. And they showed him when he first came out and he had interaction with his siblings. Right. And when I asked him about them, I said, so how are they doing now? And he said, no, they don't get along now. Because they were a close group when they was growing up. When he went off to prison, he came out and he was a little hard and he's kind of, sheltered. I mean, he's kind of defensive. Right. He's very defensive, and it's hard for him to let that guard down now. But he's doing fine. The other gentleman, he went back to prison. And so, but it's that type of things in which we're talking about. And you say it's just plain common sense. So again, when you look at the statistics and you see what's going on with us and people of color and when it comes to prison and all of that, because it's a business. It's a business. It's all about money. It's not about, rehabilitating. It's not about helping me.
Right.
It's about the money you make off of me.
Exactly.
You don't want to see me do well.
And I said that once before. I said, right now, if by some miracle, we could just say for the next year and a half, no crime. No crime whatsoever. No parking tickets, no running red lights, no this, no that. All the lawyers, all the judges, I mean, there's a lot of money going to be lost. A ton of money is going to be lost. So it is.
Well, the interesting thing, not to interrupt, but you see really a direct case, again, back to Ferguson, where the police department was really used as the city fundraising arm.
Absolutely.
And as again, to quote, what you had said, James, about the chief, to say, you get a few more, and I can kind of
overlook the wrongdoing you've done. Yeah,
exactly. So from even that aspect, and then not only were they charging folks, then in going to court, because I understand that this judge was part of that whole system. So it is not only the police force, but the legal system, and the judge was the one imposing all of these fines, etc. I understand that he finally resigned, and that with someone like him in place, it just put the nail in the coffin as far as people feeling that there is no justice.
And people don't want to believe this. Now, Detroit has been black since whenever. Okay, we had a judge, a white judge in Detroit. He was at a social event, and this other white guy obviously didn't know who he was. He asked him, he said, "Well, what do you do for a living?" His response was, "I send Negroes to jail." Well, he didn't say Negroes. So what chances a black man have going up before this judge? This guy got a slap on the wrist. He was right back on the bench. He admitted, he apologized, but that was his answer. I send them to jail. That's what his job is. I mean,
but again, I know when you came on the show, or I'm sorry, when you came on the show, but when we were talking at the summit, actually when you came on the show, and asked you how can we fix it, and you went back to these people who they need to be voted out and people need to be replaced.
Yeah.
In
Ferguson, yes.
Well, I mean in general, in the sense that, but I think a lot of it has to do with us and our not being accountable, not making them accountable.
Absolutely.
And I think because we're so separated and we're so divided, that's why they're able to do what they're able to do. Because we're so separated and divided.
And I hate to say this here, but being up north, because they didn't like me for being up north, this is I mean, it happens up north too, but it's more of a southern thing. I found I've been down here now in my 28th year. Black folks down here, they hate to challenge anything.
I know.
They just sit there and accept anything that happens to them.
Right.
I sent you to 20 years for stealing a loaf of bread. Thank you, Your Honor. I mean, it's crazy.
I know, and see, and you're absolutely right, because when I went to school up north, and when I was on campus, they was picketing. They kicked the FBI off the campus. They wasn't allowed it because they was trying to recruit. They kicked the Army was trying to recruit for them to go and fight. I saw protests every day on campus. They walking around with the signs and based on what was going on. And the thing that I noticed is you could be riding the train, New York, Boston, Philadelphia. You could go talk to the homeless guy on the street. During an election year, he can sit there and tell you about the candidates and who you should vote for. And that's just the mindset up there. It's totally different down here. They're so aware and they're so into what's going on, and it's a totally different mindset. It's amazing.
Like they're scared to death to challenge authority.
I've heard something that happened among one of the politicians among Orange County. And I said, boy, if he tried that up north, there's no way he could get away with it. But he got away with it. It was like, you saw it on the news like 1 or 2 times, and that was it. And it was like, then it just went away. And I'm like, there's no way.
Well, let me, and if anything, I'm about as northerner as you can get. One of the interesting thing is that when we think of what's happening today, if we think about it, that the civil rights movement, was a large part of the energy was from black college students, and I'm talking about the 60s, and there's been a long history that that we can talk about before that time, but let's call it the modern civil rights era, was really led by Southern black college students.
Okay.
So part of the thing that I'm wondering, and I'm not going to let them get by, in terms of saying, well, it's the South, so they don't have to do anything. One of the things that I'm wondering is that if many of this same said college students have gotten comfortable, in terms of having seen some of the benefits of the civil rights era, not seen the stark deprivation that has reigned on the generations before them, and are more into looking out for self as an individual rather than seeing themselves as tied into like a larger group or family. In other words, thinking that I'm going to get mine, it's too bad if you don't get yours, and if it means some other kid getting shot, out there, that I'm still, going to get mine. I'm wondering if there's more of a sense of individuality and not a sense of any responsibility or accountability to the group.
Well, see, this is there's always the show in the show.
Okay, go ahead.
I try to. People ask me about coming to Orlando, which I try to say it has their own. Orlando has its own identity, and you can't really describe it, and you really can't put it into words. You have to experience it for yourself.
Mm-hmm. So I learned.
Right, right, and so I would love for a study or some type of survey or study of people who are from the North, wanting to do business, wanting to work for themselves, versus people in the South. Because from my encounters and my experience, what I've seen, in which I think is all part of the same thing, in which what we both were talking about, that whole thing of people who come here from the North or somewhere like Detroit, somewhere who it may be a little faster pace, also more of a business mind, they seem to struggle in this area because they don't understand the lack of the resources and how difficult it is to pull them together. And even if you pull them together, it's still something that they haven't experienced.
And the movement, it's the movement down here at Summerstar. When I came here, some of the things that were just beginning to happen with juvenile, because I worked for the Department of Juvenile Justice for a while, these people here were amazed. Well, these crimes and stuff that the juveniles were doing after I got here in 88, they were doing this in Detroit in the 70s.
Right.
And how could you not be aware? I said, y'all need to start looking at these juveniles because, oh, no, listen, this is Florida. That's not what happened here.
Right.
And I just slowly watched it because their mind was closed to this. They could not believe that juveniles could do this and do this and do that.
It's funny, too, because when I was going to school up in Boston, one of those classes required us to read this book by Claude Brown called Man, Child in the Promised Land.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever?
Right?
Oh, yeah.
That was one of the classics back in the day.
Right. And so I'm reading this book, and this book, he was talking about in the 60s.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about, my mindset and what he was doing when he was 13, I wasn't doing when I was 20. So it's kind of like the same thing. And here he is in the 60s. He's doing stuff that I probably would end up doing when I'm like 22, 23 years old. So it's kind of like the same thing, James. I just think the whole lifestyle and just the mindset, and it just kind of blew me away of just where he was at such a young age in the 60s.
Yeah. And when these officers, when I worked at Juvenile Justice, I worked at the detention center. And when they were bringing these juveniles in left and right, I laughed at it. I said, Detroit, yeah, it's a rough city, but they would laugh at you if you bring it. They were locking up kids for trespassing, for playing basketball and baseball in a parking lot of a closed business at 7 o'clock at night. I mean, in Detroit, they would be glad to be there.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And guys going to school and cutting through orchards, being charged with felonies, trespassing, juveniles. I mean, on the way to school, I mean, it was just a big deal.
You know, to me, I think that the school system has no idea what to do now. So they have no clue what to do with these kids now. None. I just don't think that they know what to do with them. So they just have to just cut it off as fast as they can to try to do something. Because it's just like, and I'm asking you, if you talk to another cop who just tased a 5-year-old, what would you say to a cop that tased a 5-year-old?
You're crazy.
Right. So that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
You got a cop that tased a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what do you say to a cop that tased a 5-year-old?
Nothing.
Right.
And the things down here, like I said, is just like, you know, the things they got them for. It's like it's just really a big deal. And like I said, we would laugh at it. I mean, we had kids locked up for. One girl was running to the school bus. The officer told her to stop. She said, "I'm gonna miss the bus going home. I got it." He said, "Stop running." She ran and jumped on the bus. When she came to school the next day, he locked her up for not stopping.
Oh my.
He said, "When I tell you to stop," I said, "Officer, deputy." He was a deputy. I said, "Why? The charge is I forget what it was now. It's a civil charge. He was disobeying an officer, something to that effect." I said, "I read the report. It said she just ran to the bus." He said, "When I tell her to stop, I mean stop." And she didn't stop. And I wouldn't go chase behind her. I knew she'd be here tomorrow. And to them, it was just...
Well, I'll tell you though, that and just what you said, that James, when you came here, they were doing stuff like in the 70s that was happening in Detroit in the 60s and whatnot. One of the things that I'm finding now is that literally the chickens have come home to roost. Just this week, I was interviewing a youngster. I believe he's about 13 years old. For he has a court appearance that he's got to make. And in interviewing this kid, he was rattling off to me some of the things that got him into juvenile justice. This kid was not only using, but had been selling, and not just weed or pot, but cocaine. He ran off the drugs, the mollies, the ludes, whatever, and it was like, okay, that's what I did, and had that mentality already of the kind of hardened criminal, that well said, well, yeah, I knew it wasn't right, but I did it, and yeah, I'm gonna need to do a little bit of time, etc. But almost as a badge of honor, instead of an indictment of shame, So I think that our kids here in the area have caught up, because several of the kids that I've seen now, to talk to Charles, what you had mentioned, that so many of the kids have gotten either suspended from school or expelled from school. And so part of what I'm saying is, if you're getting expelled from school, then your education just gets just gets stopped, and you're lucky if you then are able to get into some other private education, etc. And in terms of private education, so-called, the parents either have to go through a song and dance to try to get funding for that, or some of the parents will say, oh, well, they'll homeschool the kid. The problem is that the parents, especially in our Black and minority communities, don't have the educational background to do effective school, school at home tutoring. So what winds up is that these kids then become the cannon fodder for that school to prison pipeline. So it seems that again, we have a number of issues that need to be taken care of. But I wanted to come back to something that you mentioned about the Detroit and the police.
Mm-hmm.
One of the, I won't call it solutions, but approaches that seem to work, and it's not anything new, is this concept of community policing, okay? Where the police are either from the neighborhood, like this state police captain down in Missouri,
Right.
or live in the neighborhood, etc. Would you say that that is an effective approach to?
Well, I think they're trying. As a matter of fact, a lot of the places, even when I first moved to Orlando, looking for a place to live, they were offering police officers a discount on their rent. And some of them even give them rent free if they just lived there and came home with a patrol car and so on for the protection. And I don't know if it had any effect on crime or not, but I know they offered it. Because I know when I was looking, and they said, "You're a policeman, so do you still have any authority?" I said, "No." "Well, if you did, we could offer you this and that and the other." So they did try it. Now, I don't know what happened to the program, but they did offer officers incentives for living in an area, living in an apartment complex, and so on. Now, it might do some good. It might not do any good. I really never examined it thoroughly to find out.
Okay. Well, you know, Charles, I'm thinking as a follow-up, and I think James has given us a lot of information and a lot to consider. I'm wondering if we ought to, you know, on one of our follow-up programs, also have some folks that are, you know, either, well, I know that the active, you know, sheriff's officer, you know, and please, probably not going to say too much of anything, but folks who have, let's say, recently retired. And I'm wondering, James, would you, you know, help us with that?
Oh, I'd be happy to.
Okay, very, very good. Because I think as we talk about it, one of the things that we're hoping on the Journey 2020 is not just to be able to talk the talk, but or even to walk the walk, but to be able to do what you obviously did in Detroit, and to be, you know, a voice for change.
Well, unless you can get 51% of the people that go along with you, you're going to be fighting an uphill battle. That's going to be the key to the thing. Because right now, if you got 1 or 2, 5 or 6 out of 40, it's going to be pretty tough.
Okay. Well, you know, although as we saw with the example of Dr. King, that he may not have been the one that was chosen, you know, for the role that he played, but in his stepping up, it allowed a lot of others, you know, to step up. So, and I would agree with you that you need a critical mass.
Yeah.
But maybe there would be some folks that would be willing to start stepping up. And also, one of the things with your experience, a lot of people think that folks like a Dr. King or Andrew Young, etc., just came out of nowhere to lead. But that what we know is that they had some solid mentors. Okay, so again, maybe one of the roles, James, that you can still, you know, play is mentoring, you know, folks that may have that desire to make a change. Okay, and by the way, I'm looking for that second book also that we talked about.
I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna say this is that most people write books because they want to tell something, they want people to know something. And I stopped several times, and my wife said, "Why did you keep quitting?" I said, "Because people know this, and once I tell it, well, they really care." And my thing is, they won't. You tell them, all these things are going wrong, all these things are so. Yeah, we know that. But that's it. So, why write it? I mean, that's where I'm at right now. I mean, people are going to really say, "Yeah, okay, but all right, big deal." You know, these cops hate so these cops do that.
But you never know, though. You just never know.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You got to close this out.
Okay, and I just want to say, and since we're in the Lenten season, and back, in the day, and I'm again reading some of the books of the apostle, and I'm sure back in those days there may have been more than one or two apostles, who said, "Well, listen, man, why write this? Because who's really gonna pay attention?" And here we are. What is it? 2,000 years later, and we're still studying the things. And James, the thing that I take from it is that the things that they wrote about, again, aside from the Jesus as the Messiah, but the things that they wrote about, and I look at things like the letters that Paul wrote to the Romans and to the various ones, are things that back in those days that they knew that they should be doing, but somehow saying it in a certain way, and saying it in the context, of this being the, if you want to call it at that time, the good news, okay, was something that still lasts with us. So, as Charles said, we don't know, but unless we do it, we'll never know.
Well, I'm doing a little more research this week, and when I'm laid up the next few weeks, I guess I have plenty of time to.
All right.
to
Okay.
Research, but
very good.
I looked at some of the situations, some of the things happened back in the 70s when I was on the force. They're happening right now, 40 years later, and they're identical. And people knew they were wrong back then. They know they're wrong now, and 40 years from now, they still know they're wrong. Will it make any difference?
Well, family, we have to wind up, our discussion. We hope that this broadcast and tonight brought you some, if not even information, but something that made you say, Join us next week for another version of the Journey 2020. As we like to say, the journey is from me to you and from you to me, so that we can reach a higher level. Good night. Join us next week.